And I remember this fear that I had, even though I was doing the work of saying that I'm no longer doing this and I want to do this and I want to be successful. I want to be a father to my. But I remember that fear, something that remains etched in my mind, was the fear of not knowing where to start or where to begin or what the resources was to assist me once I walked out of the door.
From Tyler Technologies, it's the Tyler Tech Podcast, where we talk about issues facing communities today and highlight the people, places, and technology making a difference. My name is Jeff Harrell. I'm the Director of Content Marketing, and I'm so glad that you joined us. Well, the problem we are looking at today is recidivism, and we are going to talk to two quite amazing people. The first is Silas Deane III. He is the founder and head of Community Readiness here at Tyler. He has been on the podcast before. You're going to love hearing from Silas. And he's joined by Antong Lucky. Now, I don't want to give too much away of his story, but Antong grew up in Dallas. He actually brought the Bloods gang to Dallas and spent some time incarcerated, changed his life, and you're going to love hearing from him and what he's doing now as an activist and someone who is now caring for and mentoring people that were just like him. Like I said, don't want to give too much away because you're going to love this conversation. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Silas Deane III and Antong Lucky. Silas and Antong, welcome to the Tyler Tech Podcast.
Hello. What's up, Jeff?
Oh, thank you.
Glad you guys are here, and I'd love for you to introduce yourselves to our listeners. We'll start with you, Silas. Just tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I've been on this podcast before. Always have a great time talking with you, Jeff. And, I'm so happy that we're getting to bring Antong on here. He is, I think, truly an inspiration, not only to hear his story, but also to a lot of these individuals who we're helping every single day. I'm the founder of the Community Readiness software here at Tyler Technologies, where we're connecting incarcerated individuals to job opportunities and resources across the country. We're launching in hundreds of jails across the United States to really try and change the incentives of incarceration in America and connect those individuals to better futures and breaking some of these barriers down that Antong sees every single day. And so really excited to be here with you, Jeff. Always great to see Antong. And so, yeah, that's a little bit of background on me. We did a different podcast on me, so I won't dive too into it. If you all want to hear more of that story, check out that episode on Jeff's podcast.
We'll put a reference to that one in the show notes. So, Antong, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to us and then just start to dive into your story a little bit. Tell us a little bit about you.
First of all, man, Jeff and Silas, thank y'all for having me on this podcast. I know I'm on the right podcast. I only had to question that I'm on the right podcast because that intro that Silas just gave about the work that he does is near and dear to my heart. So I know I'm in the right place. My name is Antong Lucky. I'm the president and CEO of an organization called Urban Specialists, where we work to reduce violence and poverty in urban communities, right? And we do so by identifying those who we call change makers, who have local leadership within their communities to be the ambassadors for resources to underserved and underutilized communities, right? And so that's the work that I do, and I enjoy that work because we get to work with individuals who are coming out of prison, because those individuals are those who have that kind of cadence and that rhythm and that influence. And so we try to get them to use their influence for good to help communities, right? But also just seeing the work and see how it multiplies from these individuals is the blessing for me. But I didn't start right here. So let me just say that. So I was born I'm a Dallas native. I was born in Dallas, East Dallas to be exact, right? It's South Dallas on the map, but it's East Dallas to the local. So if I say South Dallas, then my East Dallas people are going to call me on the carpet because there is a line in the sand that says on this side of the street is East Dallas and this side of the street is South Dallas. But I was born in Frazier Court housing projects, and at the age of 9 months, my father was sentenced to 55 years in prison, and he ultimately did 37 years from the time I was 9 months until the time I was 37. He was released from prison. And I remember as a kid growing up without my father in my life and my mother who had moved on, I understood how that impacted me, right? So I put a lot of my talents into school. I was a straight A student, honor roll student, talented, gifted student. The school wanted to move me up, and I love school and I love education, et cetera, et cetera. But my neighborhood that I grew up in, the name of the game was survival, like in most neighborhoods and urban communities. As much as I wanted to be a talented, gifted student, I had to amputate my personality to become what the neighborhood said I had to be. Because in my neighborhood, there was a shortage of role models and positive male influences who could guide and navigate young people like me. I mean, and I'm sure it was efforts that happened during the time that I was growing up, but they just didn't reach kids like me who were dead in the middle. The medium income in my neighborhood was $15,000 a year, and so that kind of speaks to where I come from. And so I succumbed to these influences that was in my neighborhood. I got involved in drugs. I started one of the first blood gangs in Dallas, and that's something I'm not proud of, but it did happen. And that, unfortunately, with a lot of other decisions that I made, led me to standing in front of a judge. And I remember standing in front of that judge, and that judge said to me, "Mr. Lucky, you are a menace to society." And I remember looking back saying, thinking that he was talking to somebody else in the courtroom. I couldn't believe that he was talking to me. And I remember the conversation that I had in my head. It went something like this. It was like, "But Judge, you don't understand. I'm from East Dallas. It's a rough part of Dallas. Smart kids get bullied. You have to be this way in order to survive." But that's not me. That's not who I am. But those words never came out of my mouth. And I remember being led back to my holding cell. And the probing question that was on my mind after that shock of him sentencing me to prison was, how did I go from an A honor roll student, talented, gifted student, to a judge saying that I was a menace to society? Because I didn't see myself as a menace. I saw myself as surviving. And so when I got to prison, I was fortunate to meet a mentor who walked up to me in the summer of 1997 and he said, "Little brother, all these guys in prison are falling out of place to see you. They talking about you. You have influence over these guys in here." He said, "But look, let me tell you something, little brother." He said, "If you have the ability to lead these guys to do wrong, within you is the same ability to lead these guys to do right. You're a leader." And I hadn't heard those words, right? And so he began to mentor me. He began to give me books. He began to show me the way. And I denounced my gang in prison. And that's something that you don't do. I wouldn't advise nobody to denounce your gang in prison, because that means that you by yourself. You got to, and that could be tough for you. But I denounced my gang in prison because I was so convicted on, if I spent this part of my life doing wrong and hurting people, that I want to give my life trying to help people and doing what's right. That I was ultimately the person who was suffering. My family was suffering. My daughter, who was born May 7th, and I was sentenced May 21st, 2 weeks later, was suffering, she didn't have a father. And that I said to myself that I'd never repeat the cycle that my father done to me. And here I am repeating that cycle. So I was motivated by wanting to change my situation. And so in prison, I began to educate myself. I began to speak in prison. I began to teach in prison. And ultimately in 2000, April of 2000, I was released with this passion to do the work to make sure that most people don't go through what I went through. That most young boys didn't have to make that choice between survival and being a good kid. And I spent the last 23 years of doing that work in communities.
And Tom, I'm curious. You mentioned a mentor. You mentioned your daughter. I'm curious because I would imagine there's an inflection point where you could have just kind of stayed down the path you were going on. This mentor seemed to help you
Right.
go towards a different path. What was the catalyst? Was it the combination of your daughter and your mentor? Tell us a little bit more about what was the catalyst there.
It was three things. One, it was that realization that I had in that courtroom that judge was talking to me, that I had ultimately become something that I didn't even recognize, right? At least from his perspective. Then two, the fact that I had a daughter that prior to me going to prison, I always said that I didn't want to leave my daughter as my son left me, right? And then three, just the realization how I transgressed from being a kid who would bring the teacher at school an apple to being sentenced into the Texas Department of Criminal Corrections for some of my actions. That alone made me say, "Hey, wait! This is not the way my life supposed to play out." And so I began to have self introspection at the onset of my sentence around that, right? I was having, and I remember another thing, I got to add this. When I went into prison, Tupac had just released his last album, right? And he had a song on that album that said, if it was a soundtrack for my life, I think this would be it. And he had a song on there called "To Live and Die in L.A." because I had came from gang culture, and at the time Tupac was eloquently for me speaking for the men and for the young men like me, young black males who were growing up in urban communities. He was speaking, and one thing he said in that song "Live and Die in L.A." he said, "Learn about the West Coast, B's and C's. These other guys copycats. These the G's." And when he said that, to hear that from Tupac, that pierced my soul because I said, I don't want to be known, as I'm dealing with myself, I didn't want to be known as a copycat or someone who wasn't authentic because I was really peeling back the layers that I had layered over me growing up in a mode of protection in my community. So I started unlayering those layers and getting back to who I was. And so I was facing some realization that it was hard for me looking in the mirror to accept that I had to accept. I had to accept that, I love the praises from my grandmother and grandfather, who, when I brought in good grades, that I wasn't this monster that was described in the courtroom. That wasn't me. For me, I was surviving, right? And so it was just a combination of those things that made me question a lot of things and refocus my life to what was important.
And good on you for doing the hard work, making those hard decisions. Like you said, denouncing your gang in prison, not probably the easiest decision to make, doing the hard work of figuring out who you really are, who your true self and identity is. How long did you stay in prison?
I stayed in prison close to 4 years, which was way too long for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, as you're leaving the 4 years that you spent there and you're trying to get back into society, integrate yourself back into society, what were some of the resources? What were some of the tools or lack thereof that you noticed during that time?
Well, in prison, there weren't a lot of resources for individuals like me who wanted to change or who was making this change. There weren't resources. And I remember this fear that I had, even though I was doing the work of saying that I'm no longer doing this and I want to do this and I want to be successful. I want to be a father to my, but I remember that fear, something that remains etched in my mind was the fear of not knowing where to start or where to begin or what the resources was to assist me once I walked out of the door. When I would just some transparent moment for me right now. When I walked out of the walls in Huntsville, Texas, I was so afraid, right? I had spent 4 years saying what exactly I was gonna do, how I was gonna do it, et cetera, et cetera. But when I walked out those doors, I was so afraid. And when I thought back on it in hindsight, I was afraid because there was no blueprint for a person like me to go back into society. It was no blueprint. It was no place or no resource that I could have said that could have never navigated me or guided me back into my freedom. Nothing was available. So it was like the fear of having to figure this out on your own, or the fear of not having the answers to your next step. is a fear that never want to I never want to experience again.
Because I imagine when you're in that situation, there's structure. You've got a schedule. When you're in prison, there's structure around it. Now you're leaving that structure, leaving those schedules, and you've got these big dreams and these big goals, but you're not sure
Yeah.
exactly, like you just said, how to find that.
Man, they saying I had to get an ID, I have to get a license, I have to get a social security card, I have to get all this stuff, I gotta get a job, I gotta get a place to stay. And I'm saying, how do I do this? And it was a certain part of me that was too embarrassed to even ask, to ask as a grown man, hey, how do I get my driving license? Hey, where do I go get a job? Hey, what's an interview? What do you do at an interview? What do you wear? How do you find a job? Where are the resources at? As a grown man, it's a level of embarrassment, right? When you don't have those answers. And I think, it's a level of embarrassment. I would say that.
Yeah. I think this is a great time to move over to you, Silas, because this is a challenge that you recognized and are looking to address. So let's tell us a little bit about some of the things that you're working on.
I don't have that story that Antong has. And it's through these conversations with people, with Antong, with other people like that, where we start identifying there really isn't much of a reentry infrastructure at all for any of these individuals. And, Antong is somebody who's clearly very intelligent, and he did the work. He had to make those changes, but like there are a lot of other individuals in there. And Anton and I had talked about that, of like a lot of individuals who weren't as successful because they didn't have those opportunities coming out of there. And I've told this story before, but it strikes me a lot. We went to one jail in Louisiana, and I walked up to the jailer and said, "Could I get a list of resources that you hand the inmates when they get out of jail?" I was honestly just curious at the time. And he just looks at me in the face and laughs. And he goes, "Son, we don't have any resources." He goes, "Man, we stick them on a bus and we ship them to New Orleans." And we kept hearing that over and over again. And it's like, how do you ever expect these individuals to change? How do you ever expect them to to change that cycle? And the answer was that they didn't. They expect them to come right back into that facility. And statistically, they were right, because there isn't an infrastructure. And there's, 66% of those people statistically within 3 years will be back in that jail. And I think it's like 83% of the long-term recidivism rate. And so, in my opinion, it starts with looking at them as individuals, as human beings who are intelligent, who are just as ambitious as I am, or you are, Jeff, or any one of us, and saying, okay, how do we provide you the resources to be able to take the opportunity to take responsibility for your own life and take those challenges? And that's not going to be everyone. That's not going to, help everyone or be that, but like providing that system when you leave that jail to know where you're going to sleep or know where you're going to be able to find food tomorrow because you've been in jail for 4 years or 10 years or 20 years or whatever it is. You might not even know how to use an iPhone at that point. And by connecting with the community, we can provide those opportunities to those individuals like Antong and like those people who Antong helps every single day in that jail to better their lives and connect to resources and actually address this problem. And instead of being this black sheep of, the world on how we treat these individuals, actually be a model for how we should treat I think there's a great Nelson Mandela quote that says, you shouldn't judge a country by how it treats its highest citizens, but how it treats its lowest. And I think the United States is an example of forgetting the importance of those individuals.
So you identify the problem, talk with people like Antong to kind of help fill your understanding of the problem. What are some of the things that you're doing now to help address it?
Yeah, so with the awesome team at Tyler, with the support of people like Mandy and Rusty and Brian and every incredible person at Tyler who actually shows interest and passion in this problem, have come together to help create this community readiness software that we're launching across the nation. So those individuals who are incarcerated can walk up to that kiosk, they can click on community readiness, they'll be able to find job opportunities or resources or food banks or transitional homes, apply right there with our partners video interview and be able to have that waiting for them when they leave that facility. They'll be able to create their resumes. They'll be able to get certifications. And not only will those certifications be handed to them in paper, but they'll be able to attach that to their resume and use that to apply with groups like the American Job Centers. We've just partnered with the United Way. We're partnering with Feeding America so they can apply for SNAP benefits from the jail cell. And all of these different pieces are coming together in order to try and weave this fabric together to help those individuals actually have a chance at changing their lives. And then Anton's a great example of somebody who's done that himself and then has come back into those communities and is helping tons of other people. And that's how we start addressing this problem.
Yeah, and I'd love to go back to you, Antong, on that. So hearing that, I know you know Silas. You guys have talked about this. Hearing the vision, and I know you have a heart for people that just that are a couple of steps behind you for where you were. What's your reaction to that? And talk to us a little bit about what this could mean to people.
Man, my reaction, first of all, I have to thank Silas and all the good people over at Tyler Technologies for even coming up with this. I got to say that I'm just listening to him and I'm smiling because I can go to a situation just happened the other day. I was in D.C., right? And it made me think of you, Silas. It made me think of community readiness, right? I was in D.C., right? I checked into my hotel. And immediately after I checked into my hotel, the reception gave me a list of everything that's around me, the bars, the restaurants, the places, the blah, blah, blah. And I thought about you, right? I thought about community readiness, right? And then so a friend of mine in D.C. called me right when I made it to my room with this piece of paper. And I said, I'm looking at some nice places to eat. What are some other nice places to eat other than what's on this paper? And so my friend said, you have to download this app called What's Around Me. And I downloaded this app, and this app shows me everything, the bar, the comedy places. It had everything, the shopping outlets, the Walmarts, everything that I need was in this app. And I immediately thought about community readiness. I said, now, we're in the 21st century, right? What you guys are doing is cutting edge, and it says that we care about people. Now, if I'm an individual who coming out of prison and I can look at an app or a kiosk that tells me everything that's available for me, now that's when you operate that's when you operate that you care about people. That fear that I had that I was talking about 20 years ago that overwhelmed me because I didn't have no direction. I didn't have a map or anything to point me in the right direction. You mean to tell me I can walk up to a kiosk, have a job interview waiting for me, or check in to find housing or employment? That's doing it the right way. That said that you care about people. So when I'm listening to that, man, I'm like, wow, that's dope, man, to have that resource for individuals coming out of prison, that they don't have to experience that fear. You have resources that says, here go the resources right here, whatever you need, and you can dial in before you even get out of prison. I'm not even talking about walking out the door, before you get out of prison, before you get out of jail. That's how we do reentry. That's the best way you do reentry. That's saying that I want you to succeed because we understand those individuals, if they succeed, then our communities succeed. So I would say I'm saying kudos to you guys for this, man. Because I'm listening to you and I'm getting excited because I'm saying this should be all across the country. It shouldn't be no jail, no holding facility, no prison that don't have these kiosks available for those individuals because we have too much data. And I'm gonna be quiet that says 80% of the people that go to prison are gonna come back home. So we might as well face that. We might as well prepare them to succeed once they walk out those doors. And I think that's what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I love that. And this is a conversation we want to continue to have over time. But Silas, I'd love to go back to you for kind of some closing thoughts. Because I know you've got a vision, you've got a heart, you've got a passion for this. You can see it in Antong's face, how excited he is about that. I'd love to kind of close out with any kind of final thoughts, kind of your why and your passion behind kind of what's driving you.
I mean, like I said, this started out, I didn't go to jail. I was privileged. I came from a family who I had opportunities. I got to travel. I went to Vanderbilt University. I'm not from that, but seeing it with my own eyes, having the opportunity to go into one of these jails and, and being surrounded by this system, even tangentially, I was blown away by how we treated these individuals. And it's, I don't think it's right. And really, it just started from like a, really, you're going to tell me you just stick them on a bus and you're just going to laugh at me for that? Like that's some kind of weird question that I'm asking. And I have these opportunities. And I was thinking it was at the same time when I was graduating college too, when I came up with this idea. I was like, I'm having a hard time finding a job. I can't even find anything. And like, I just graduated from Vanderbilt, one of the best schools in the country, and yet I'm still struggling on finding a job. How are we ever expecting these individuals to like even have a fighting chance? And it's speaking with people like Antong, and we didn't get to go too deep into his story, but man, if you have that opportunity to get his book, you should read it. It's called A Redemptive Path Forward, and check out the work that he's doing because, man, he, as he says, brings the heat and is able to, really kind of show the struggle that it's ingrained in the system. His dad was there, and then without even really realizing what he was doing, came into this situation and not having those resources to come out. And that's what we're trying to address. We're trying to change that system of incarceration in America. Where these Scandinavian countries have a 20% long-term recidivism rate. Ours is 83%. That's not that Danish people are better people than Americans. It's that they see them as human beings, and then we're providing we want to look at it and say, we're going to provide those resources to them because it's the right thing to do. It's economically the right thing to do. It's socially the right thing to do. It's mentally the right thing to do. It's morally the right thing to do. It creates more protected and connected communities that helps everyone. And that's what we're doing here. And so I'm grateful to know Antong and know a lot of other individuals like him across the country. Uh, and thank you, Jeff, too, for supporting this through the podcast and talking to both of us on it.
Absolutely. And Antong, I want to say too, thank you for you and your story and the fact that you're rewriting that story and helping others kind of learn from that as well. And I would love to hear more about your book and some of the things that you're doing and how someone can get in contact with you if they'd like to do that.
Oh man, thank you, Jeff, Silas. Thank you guys for having me on this podcast. I think what you just said, Silas, is super and utterly important to this fight for what you just said. It takes people like you, it takes people like Jeff, who may not have this experience, to be the ambassadors for something as good as this, right? It takes that. We all have a place to contribute, a part to play in this, and you guys are playing your parts, right? And so I appreciate that. And I will say this while we're on this podcast, that whatever you guys need from me as it relates to this, you got me, because I understand truly how important it is to have a resource like the Community Readiness Program. I understand that. So you don't even have to convince me. But my book is A Redemptive Path Forward from Incarceration to a Life of Activism. It chronicles my journey from a kid to getting caught up in the system, then ultimately turning my life around to become one of the most sought out speakers. I've been to the White House, so many awards I can't even name, and my life has been blessed. I'm in a great position, but I want to share the message to those who are sitting behind bars that there's nothing unique about me other than the fact that I made a decision to change my life around, and that what happened for me can happen for the individual that's sitting behind bars trying to figure it out, because I was once that person. And I wanted to show that. And so that's what my book is about. It can be found on Barnes and Nobles, Walmart, Amazon, anywhere they sell books. You can go purchase my book, and I encourage you to go purchase it, and you would definitely love it. You can follow me on social media at Antong, Antong Speaks, where I highlight and educate, and a radio show and all that good stuff. Just about doing this work where we're just saying to most people to use your influence for good. We all have influence, and that we should use it for good. That's what you're doing, Silas. That's what you're doing, Jeff. And that's what we all should do. Use our influence for good. So thank y'all for having me, and keep doing this amazing work.
And what a great final statement. And I'll put all the links to Antong's book, his social media, and the show notes. Silas, if someone wanted to reach out to you and connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that as well?
Yeah, please send me an email, s3@tylertech.com, or add me on social media. Hey Silas is all of my social media on LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, whatever. I'm very receptive and open to anyone reaching out. I love to have conversations like this. And that's how we change this system, is through conversation. And that's why I love, podcasts where we can actually talk about these things, because I think that's why we haven't made a lot of progress on this stuff, because everyone just wants to brush it under the rug and no one wants to talk. And so things like this, bringing people like Antong on here to speak to a different audience, and hearing different stories, hearing what we're doing at Tyler, with the support of everything we're doing, that's how we make change across America. And this is just the beginning. This isn't where we're going to end. This is the very beginning, but we're starting to make change. We're going to continue making change across the United States, across the world. So
Yeah, this is a conversation we'll continue to have. And here at the podcast, we say that we love to highlight the people and technology making a difference, and both of you guys are doing that. So thank you so much for being on the podcast, and we'll definitely be talking more about this topic very, very soon. So thank you guys.
thank you, Jeff, and Antong. Always great to see you. Hopefully I'll see you soon. We keep running into each other, so.
Okay, I'll be waiting on you. I'm waiting on you.
All right, sounds good.
Well, I absolutely loved that conversation. Thank you to both Antong and Silas for your perspective on this really important topic and how to reduce recidivism. And thank you for joining the Tyler Tech podcast. We drop episodes quite often, so make sure you subscribe. We have big plans for the remainder of 2023 and beyond. Well, again, my name is Jeff Harrell. I'm the Director of Content Marketing here at Tyler Technologies. We'll talk to you soon.